Imagine walking a low-tide beach and seeing a triangle of stone jutting from the sand, glossy, serrated, and heavy. You lift it and realize you are holding a single tooth from the most formidable shark that ever lived. That feeling the weight of time in your palm connects us to Ototus Megalodon, the shark that hunted whales between roughly 23 and 3.6 million years ago. I'm a science communicator in paleontology, and today I want to help you see past the movie monster into the real animal, built by evolution and revealed one tooth, one rib, one bite mark at a time. We tell its story not with skeletons, the part of a shark made mostly of cartilage rarely fossilizes, but with teeth by the millions, vertebral centra-like thick coins, and the occasional jaw fragment that lets us triangulate scale with care. A single tooth can be taller than your palm, enamel slick as glass, serrations sharp enough to whisper when you run a thumbnail along them. Multiply that by dozens of teeth in multiple rows, constantly replaced, and you start to sense a conveyor belt of cutting edges always ready for the next strike. Because the biggest fossils get the biggest headlines, size has been a tug-of-war between imagination and method. Conservative reconstructions based on tooth dimensions and living shark proportions suggest adults commonly exceeded 10 meters, with giants perhaps reaching 15 or a bit more, while juveniles were already the size of a car. Whatever the exact ceiling, this was an apex predator engineered for power, a deep, torpedo-like body, a tail built to deliver short, explosive bursts, jaws hinged like an industrial press, and teeth built not for slicing fish fillets, but for dismantling bones. When we say it hunted whales, we mean the diverse small and medium-sized whales of the Miocene seas, sleek dolphin like Odontocetes, early baleen whales still finding their ecological lanes, sirenians, seals, and occasionally gentfish. Fossil bones from Peru, Chile, the eastern United States, Japan, and South Africa carry semicircular bite traces that match the tooth spacing of Megalodon like a key fits a lock, and some vertebrae show healed gouges, proof that not every attack ended in a kill. Those scars are precious because they turn behavior the hardest thing to fossilize into evidence. Imagine an ambush from below in bright water, the shark lifting through its own shadow to drive the leading edge of its jaws into a rib cage, disarticulating the thorax with one crunch, and then circling back to feed methodically on the richest parts. Marine mammals store energy in fat-rich tissues. To a predator, blubber is not just food, it is fuel that pays for the energetic cost of being huge. Teeth show growth lines like tree rings, isotopes archived in enamel record temperatures and movement, and where we find concentrations of very small teeth in shallow, warm deposits, we infer nurseries, safe havens where pups could grow before entering the open sea. Sites in Panama's Gatun Formation, Florida's Bone Valley, and along the South Carolina coast suggest such warm water nurseries scattered around ancient shorelines, hinting at a life cycle that connected tropical shallows to offshore hunting grounds. Predators do not just eat, they shape ecosystems by fear and by thinning the vulnerable. A population of giant sharks repeatedly targeting juvenile whales would have nudged prey to mature faster, migrate differently, or calve in safer waters. That dance between hunter and hunted is written in teeth the way wind is written in sand ripples, subtle, patterned, cumulative. And yet, for all that drama, most of what we know about Megalodon began the same quiet way it begins for beachcombers today. Someone spots a dark triangle, rinses it in surf, and feels time bite back. In my field notebook, I keep a sketch made beside a dredge spoil heap in North Carolina where a volunteer diver handed me a tooth as wide as his palm. He was a former mechanic who learned to equalize his ears by practicing in a bathtub. He told me that on days when visibility dropped to 3 feet, he kept one hand on the anchor line and used the other like a blind person's cane, until his fingers found the subtle geometry of enamel buried in the silt. Fossils are not only data, they are human stories of curiosity and perseverance, and Megalodon, more than almost any fossil animal, invites ordinary people into the scientific process by letting them discover pieces of a giant and ask, How do we know what we think we know? We start by measuring crown height and width, then compare metrics with living lamniform sharks to build equations that estimate jaw arc and body length. Equations are only as honest as their assumptions. So, we test them with clues from vertebral growth bands to models asking how much muscle a bone-cutting bite needs. Each method adds a thread. Braided together, they make rope sturdy enough to cross deep time without snapping into myth. Picture a calm Miocene morning above an inland shelf where river plumes braid clouds of plankton into streaks of green. A pod of small baleen whales moves through the haze, filter feeding, calves tucked into the slipstream of their mothers. Far below, warmer water and clearer light let a shadow peel off the bottom as a hunter rises. The classic mistake is to imagine constant sprinting. Giant predators survive by budgeting, not by burning, and ambush delivers the best return on investment. Megalodon likely patrolled thermal boundaries and topographic features, shelf edges, sand waves, canyon mouths where currents concentrate prey, and sound bends to hide approach. A sudden burst, jaws propped open by thick ligaments, a fore-to aft sweep that shears ribs and collapses lungs, and then a wait while the shock ripples through the pod. By hitting hard once and feeding for hours, a giant can live within the strict math of calories in and calories out. We often ask people to imagine how strong the bite must have been, but strength here lives in leverage and tooth geometry as much as in muscles. Size alone means less than smart design. We think of a row of broad, triangular blades meeting bone. Serrations initiate cracks that race ahead of the cusp like lightning paths, weakening the structure so the next rake separates it cleanly. That's why so many fossil ribs and jawbones show paired gouges with crushed interiors and flaked edges. The teeth were not chisels so much as guided wedges. Across the world, we see the same forensic message repeated. Whales with tailbones bitten through, dolphin skulls with missing snouts, vertebrae scored at regular spacing consistent with a spiral jaw loaded with backup teeth. The pattern tells us more than any single spectacular fossil because it appears in different oceans and layers, which means we are seeing behavior expressed through an ecosystem, not an accident frozen in stone. In Peru's Pisco Basin, for example, the desert preserves whole marine scenes like a museum without walls. There, bite marks on young mysticetes hint at seasonal targeting of inexperienced prey. Along the Calvert Cliffs of Maryland, collectors find layers rich in shark teeth lying with the bones of seals, sirenians, and early whales, as if a tide receded and left the tools and the remains of a workshop mingled on one bench. Panama's Gatun Formation adds another layer to the life story by clustering juvenile megalodon teeth in warm, sheltered settings protected by barrier islands. If you map those finds with paleocurrents, you can sketch likely travel corridors, pups in nurseries, adolescents ranging along coasts, adults commuting between calving grounds and richer offshore pastures. This is where science meets art, and why I often work with a wildlife illustrator named Nora, who grew up in a fishing town where the boatyard smelled like pine tar and diesel. When we plan scenes, Nora asks how water looks at eye level, how plankton filters light, and how an ambush would unfold moment by moment. She draws from the evidence and adds the physics of water, the economy of muscle, and the presence of doubt. In one painting, a giant shadow rises under a calf near a delta, flushing the herd so the youngster falls behind. Only then does the shark strike. It feels cruel to watch, but cruelty is a human word. In nature, strategy and survival are the engines of form. Even rivals had to play that game. In the Middle Miocene lived macroraptorial sperm whales, with jaws full of interlocking teeth and skulls braced for ramming. Animals like Leviathan that probably hunted big prey in the same waters. The co-occurrence of their teeth and megalodons in several deposits suggests overlapping ranges. And while we do not have a mural of them fighting, the simplest reading is shared opportunity and occasional conflict. When top predators overlap, they carve space by time of day, by habitat, by prey size, and by sheer audacity. I imagine acoustic duels in murky canyons, click trains and low calls ricocheting while a giant shark tracks silence as if it were a sound. Later, near the end of Megalodon's reign, early members of the lineage that would give rise to orcas appear, social hunters with flexible diets. Add in the great white shark evolving toward the powerful generalist we recognize today, and you have a cast ready to test any specialist that requires warmth, coasts, and abundant mid-sized whales. But specialization is not a weakness until the world changes. Giant size buffers starvation and deters injury, yet it also demands reliable nurseries and predictable prey. Warm, shallow shelves are perfect cradles for shark pups, and coastlines braided by deltas focus lifelike lenses. If currents shift, if sea levels fall, if productivity moves poleward, those cradles can empty. Think of Megalodon as plugged into a Miocene power grid. The wires ran through tropical shelves, up food-rich river plumes, across migration routes of small whales. Pull a few wires and the lights flicker. Sever enough and even a titan dims. Now we turn to an ending, though in science endings are just changes we can measure. For Megalodon, the change gathered like wine before our front. Beginning in the late Miocene and sharpening into the Pliocene, global climates cooled, ice sheets expanded, sea levels fell, and ocean circulation reorganized. Two consequences matter most for a giant warm water shark that needs coastal nurseries and predictable prey. The tropics narrowed, and many of the whales that hunted began to spend more time in colder, highly productive waters far from the equator. When calving grounds and feeding grounds pulled apart, migrations lengthened. When shelves shrank, nursery bays vanished. When upwelling zones intensified at higher latitudes, the center of energy in the oceans slid poleward. A titan tuned to warmth could still follow food, but it would pay a thermal tax. Like many lamnid sharks, Megalodon probably had some ability to keep parts of its body warmer than the water, a performance boost with a price tag. Big bodies smooth out hunger, yet they also multiply the calories needed to stay ready. If the richest pastures now lay in seasonally cold seas, it faced a trade-off: chase whales into chill at high cost, or wait in the subtropics and take what comes. Meanwhile, new competitors entered the stage. The great white matured into a swift, heat-tolerant generalist that could raid shoals of fish, scavenge carcasses, and tackle marine mammals. Early orca-like delphinids experimented with tactics only social hunters can use, from coordinated herding to harassment of large prey, while macroraptorial sperm whales still lingered in some regions. None of these alone would fell a giant, but together, under a cooling sky, they tightened the margins. Fossil records sketch the fade, plenty of Megalodon teeth in older layers, fewer in younger, and then silence after about 3.6 million years ago. Teeth do not tell us how many individuals lived, yet across basins the last appearances cluster around that date, like lighthouses going dark along a coast. We should resist neat stories that pick one killer cause. Extinction is usually an accumulation of ordinary pressures that stop being ordinary when they coincide. For Megalodon, think of lost nurseries, shifting prey, colder waters, and nimble rivals as for fingers pressing on one scale. When the balance tips, the line ends. Does that mean the seas were safer for whales afterward? Not exactly. New predators filled gaps, and whales themselves became larger. Perhaps in part because longer migrations in productive, seasonal oceans rewarded big bodies that could travel far and fast. Predator and prey continued their spiral, only with different dancers. Here is where the fossil record humbles us. We can draw arrows on maps and chart isotope wiggles, but the ocean is a system of systems, and a small shift in timing can topple a giant while sparing a minnow. Some people feel a pang of loss when they hear Megalodon is gone, as if the world were less wondrous without a three-story shark hunting whales. I understand that feeling. A love's edges, and a giant silhouette against blue water, and edge our imagination's grip. Yet the real wonder is that we can recover so much from such simple pieces. A tooth is a triangle, a rib is a curve, a bite mark is a semicircle missing from stone. From those shapes we infer hunting styles, nursery bays, migrations, and extinctions, and we do it in a way that anyone can join, starting with a walk on the beach and a curious eye. I think of the mechanic turned diver, of Nora with her pencil, of teachers pouring trays of fossils onto classroom desks so kids can sort teeth by size and imagine the lives behind them. Science has room for all of that data, craft, and community braided like strands of rope strong enough to lower us into deep time and bring us back with stories. So, when you hear the word Megalodon, let it mean more than a monster. Let it mean a lineage of mackerel sharks that grew into a specialist fit for warm seas rich in mid-sized whales, a traveler that stitched coasts to open water, a hunter that shaped the choices of smaller animals. Let the ending teach humility. Even the mightiest are bound to the climate and currents that feed them. And let the story ignite care for living oceans. The choices we make, from how we warm the air to how we fish, ship, and protect nursery habitats, ripple outward. We cannot revive a Pliocene giant, but we can keep its lesson alive by honoring the nurseries of today's sharks, by giving whales room to migrate, by letting ecosystems keep their complexity. To hold a fossil tooth is to hold a receipt written by time, proof that an ocean once paid for a predator's power with light captured by plankton and passed through many mouths. May that small weight in your hand remind you that deep time is not elsewhere. It is here, lapping at our feet, asking us to look closely, to measure honestly, and to wonder responsibly.